Okay, looks like I'm live. We're going to do a couple of things this year. It's the end of the year, it's end of 2019, and I was supposed to give a presentation to True Folk Kindred in Southern California, a great group of people. Have always been very nice to me. Um, the other day I was talking about the Harboth's joke, the competition between Odin and Thor, about Thor wanting to cross the river. It didn't go so hot for him. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But for the most part, the lesson for today's world is, Thor sitting there getting butthurt about a bunch of stuff that he really can't do anything about. And we have the same kind of situation. We have the same kind of situation today in social media, with the press, and many other things. It seems at times as if you look on there and it might be the whole world doesn't appreciate your opinion. We can get wrapped up in that. We can get confused in that. We can begin to enjoy the negative feedback that comes from that every bit as much as we can enjoy the positive. We can wallow in that shit just like a pig in the pen. And it is very much like driving along at night, and a bug hits the windshield here and a bug hits the windshield there, and the next thing you know, when the sun comes up, your whole windshield's covered in bugs and you can't see. And before we even know it, we're so burdened with accepting these insults as if there's some kind of truth to them about who and what we are. That's not going to cut it. And we got to figure out how to deal with that. A lot of times people can't seem to get it. A lot of times people get wrapped up in the moment and just walk through life believing all the negative stuff that people throw their way. And that doesn't do any of us any good. The horrible Hoth tells us all of this stuff. He insults every aspect of who he is. One of the things I find interesting is what he talks about with the women. Harbaugh says, "Much lovecraft I wrought with them who ride by night, when I stole them by stealth from their husbands. A giant hard was Lebarth, methinks. His wand he gave me as a gift, and I stole his wits away." He's just telling Thor that this low-life individual who has never lived any kind of successful or honorable or with any kind of integrity, that's one of the things for the people that are gnawed upon by Nidhogg at the lowest parts of Niflheim, those seducers of men's wives. And here's one of them. Those who ride by night are the witches. So this low life is throwing all of these insults at him, and he can't do anything about it. He gets madder and madder and madder. And we see it every day. We see men that get done with some young lady, and they begin a campaign of terror to convince everyone that, well, she was really crazy to begin with. Well, I got news for you. If you showed up here, it ain't because everything's going good in your life. There's probably some kind of issue. I think it's a real shame that other men don't always have what it takes to say, hey, you might want to cut that out. She has every much right to be here as anybody else. That's the kind of thing that really gets under my skin. But be that as it may, there's a lot bigger fish to fry in the world, ain't there? We got people, and I deal with it every day. There's always somebody online wanting to say, well, Brian Wilton's a racist, homophobe, bigot, he's just a jackass. Largely what it boils down to is Brian didn't buy into my fantasy the way I thought he should, and he's an ass. Whatever. Not much you can do about that. But if you focus on that, like we watched our parents do while we were growing up, watching the evening news, waiting for the other shoe to drop, blaming the politicians for everything going on in the world, arguing about what's going on at work and how this, that, or the other is not doing us any good, or the constant source of frustration, we forget who we are. We can get so wrapped up in that. Next thing you know, we're drunk or whatever else, or we're just old, bitter, and resentful people. Rude most of the time. It's very hard for someone that's wrapped up in that kind of nonsense to be kind. It's very hard for someone that's wrapped up in that kind of nonsense or believing in it to demonstrate that this path and way of life we've all chosen might really be worthwhile. Because if all we're doing is run around leading with the chin, talking about what we think we know and the great conspiracies of the world and this, that, and the other, how's that going to help you put food on the table? How's that going to help you do anything? So as we leave 2019, it's a real good opportunity for a lot of us to sit back and say, I've been complaining about this for a long time now. It hasn't changed. Nothing I've said or done has made a bit of a difference. And it seems like the more we complain about it, the more right we think that we are, the more we seem to draw our identity from the negative feedback that comes from it. That's not healthy. By any stretch of the imagination, is that what you'd consider a quality style of life? Well, we see in that lore the Harboth joke, the same kind of frustration. The warder of men himself has to deal with it from Odin. Odin's teaching him a lesson. So you can't walk around getting butt hurt, spun out of shape, or bent all in all kinds of knots about every little thing that everybody says. We've got lives to live. We have families to take care of. And you see that lesson learned and taken into consideration when we come to the Alvasmal, where Thor has to make a determination about this person who is woefully inadequate, underqualified, and certainly not worthy of marrying his daughter Thrud. He doesn't use his fists in that. That story is entirely a question and answer, to question and answer well, as it says in the Havamal. And Thor does a pretty good job of it. And he still makes the determination. He just tricks him. He just keeps him out there talking about what he thinks he knows, about how important he thinks he is. Alvasmal, this super intelligent dude who thinks he's going to float above everybody else on brain power alone and come to the top of the pack. And when the sun shines, he really ain't got any business standing there. He gets sunburnt, turns to stone, however you want to look at it. That's growth. And I don't care how we look at it, man. We look at our lore. There's this gigantic brute of a god, it's always in the East, who finally figures out that I can't stand around and be mad about this. I've got to protect my family with something more than just brute strength. I got to use my mind. That's something we should consider as we move into 2020. It's not going to slow down, but at some point, we got to stop taking the bait and reacting to that kind of nonsense. Because as long as we keep buying into that, playing that game, we're going to forget who we are. And we're going to get wrapped up in that kind of righteous indignation, negative feedback loop, building our egos up about how right we are against this person or that person. And, well, there's no, where are you going to go with that? What are you going to do with that? Is that all you're ever going to be? Right? I had an old lady one time told me her brother-in-law was Pretty Boy Floyd. She was an old woman when I was a teenager. She said, I think I'd much rather be happy than right these days. If you're walking around angry all the time because of this spirituality and way of life, maybe we ought to consider, or maybe we ought to be asking ourselves, is that really why I decided to go against the grain of literally the rest of the world and find this different path? Or accept this calling to this path? Just so I could be angry? Just so I could continue acting in the same destructive manners as I did before that? You know, using women as I see fit, or using men as I see fit, being a gold digger, blah, 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 and then going on a campaign of terror against them once you get done with them because, well, you know, these men, we're all, you know, we blah, blah. Oh my gosh. Drives me insane. But for the greater whole, there's a lot of people out there that would tell us what we should be mad about, what we should be angry about. And if we're not as angry about them as whatever it may be as they are, well, you really don't quite, you don't understand. More importantly, I don't care. You go on with your bad self, have at it. I got other things to do. But sometimes there are people that take a look at it and say, wait a minute, I don't want to be like that anymore. I spent my life being mad about stuff. I learned it from my father. I learned it from my mother. At a certain point, they stopped, and then I'm still sitting here being mad about things. How do I fix it? Well, we got to take a look at what image we might become if we follow this faith. What might we look like if we follow this faith and spirituality, this way of life, this path, however you want to perceive it, that we largely call also true, or even paganism, or any other thing that you think is different from the mainstream? What is the image of what I can become if I follow this? Because I promise you, if you're a Christian, people are going to think, well, he's right with the Lord. He's going to go places. He's going to do things. He's going to achieve blessings, and he will have grace and favor. What do we got? We got the right to be mad. I think that's been pretty well cultivated. Ain't got us nowhere. But we got that down pat. Well, I have the right to be, I know these things. Blah, yeah. But what happens when we can't figure it out and we start asking? Well, the answer to that's in the Hoth, or an aspect of it. See, Otter's fooling around there, and his altar stone is turned to glass from the heat of sacrifices, blood, and offerings to Freya. Always asking for something. I'm going to ask the gods for something. A gift for a gift. Well, have you made yourself into that gift? I don't wear a hammer because I am the hammer. Have you made yourself worthy? Have you cultivated a thought process that would accept what that gift might look like? Have you done any of that? No, I just killed a couple of animals and maybe a small horse and blah, blah. I burnt some sage. Yeah, I got some candles lit. I got all this kind of stuff going on. But I haven't changed a single thing about how I think. Well, that's not going to do you any good. You're going to sit in there and you're going to, all the next thing you know, well, this don't work. And why? I have a right to be mad. I don't. See how the little game we play with ourselves? In the Hoth, Freya says something real simple. She looks at this, white trash kind of ratchet looking chick that lives under a rock. That's pretty bad. If you're living under a rock, chances are things ain't going so hot in your life. Kind of that under the bridge crowd feel to it, right? Freya, this goddess of what we call love, abundance, fertility, blessings, all those wonderful things. She says, maiden awake, wake thee, my friend. Now, I don't know if she's trying to bamboozle her or not, but if women were to treat each other in that same manner when they first come into this spirituality and way of life, and look at that woman and remember how they felt when they came in here, well, these hairy-legged dudes might not have such an easy time running a hustle on them. That might be something to think about. Because whether we like it or not, it ain't these dudes that are going to carry it forward. It's going to be the mothers and how they teach their children. That's what's going to move it forward. Now, I don't even look at it any way you want to. That's how it's going to break down. But she calls Heindel a sister. She's taking Otter on a trail. She's taking him to seek favor. She says, my sister Heindle, in thy hollow cave already comes darkness, and ride must we to Valhall to seek the sacred hall. I don't know, there's some conjunction. He might be dead, who knows, but he may not be. It's a wager in the foreign metal and gold. But she's going to seek the favor of here, Father, seek we to find. To his followers gold he gladly gives. It's a pretty tall order. Hey, that means something to me. I might be able to expect a little bit of that myself. Why shouldn't I? Every other Viking that went a plundering, he thought so. Anytime any of the people before that very small snapshot of what this cultural heritage looks like, they went a harrying or went a warring or raided a neighboring tribe, there was hope that there would be gold or food. That's a good one too. To Hermoth he gave helm and mailcoat. Pretty stout stuff. To Sigmund he gave a sword as a gift. So some of them he gives gold, but to others he gives the tools necessary to build a future. Doesn't just lay it out for them. He gives the tools necessary to build a future. And that's pretty, and Freya does the same thing here with Otter. So if we're looking at 2019 and looking at the end of it and seeing how we've acted, we might back up and regroup for a second and see, what tools do I have that I haven't been using? Triumph to some and treasure to others, to many wisdom and skill in words. That might be all you got, wisdom and skill in words. But good night, ain't that enough? Fair winds to the sailor, and to the singer his art, and a manly heart to many a hero. That one moment you need it, when it counts, when the chips are down, like the security guard in that most recent attempted church shooting in Texas. Guy got off of, 50 yards, I don't know how long the shot was, on a moving target of a man's head. In an instant, pow. In that moment, he had a manly heart of a hero. Do you? Do you know? Thor shall I honor, and this shall I ask, that his favor true mayst thou ever find, though little the brides of giants he loves. But here's the most important part. In all of those, Odin's not given here, you're not going to pray for Mercedes-Benz and get it. Here's some tools. Build yourself into something and go get it. You can have it. Nothing to say, nothing stopping you but your own thoughts. Nothing to stopping you but your own limitations. Get rid of them. Being mad about something you ain't got no control over, getting lost in that kind of stuff. We got to remind ourselves we have these. And this is sometimes how we figure it out. From the stall now one of thy wolves lead forth, and along with my boar shalt thou let him run. For slow my boar goes on the road of the gods, and I would not tire my worthy steed. You can take that a couple of ways, but the way I'm looking at it is she's got him dressed up like a boar, camouflaged to kind of sneak through wherever they need to go. She's riding a worthy steed. So she tells Heimla, put a challenge behind that boar and get his butt in gear so he can get to moving along and figure out which of these gifts he owns and has possession of. So that's something we got to consider. If we're sitting around getting mad about stuff we can't change or do anything about, are we cultivating those gifts that we all seem to have? Everybody's got some kind of special uniqueness about them. It might be skill with words. It might be a song. It might be anything. It's a wonderful kaleidoscope of combinations of all of these tribes of Northern Europe that have boiled down into this society that you can go do just about anything you want to do. If you want to build a business and make $1 million or $10 million, you can go do that. If you want to sit on the side of the road and beg for change, you can go do that. But it all has to do with whether or not you're going to cultivate those gifts you were born with, those talents, those ability, that strength, that character. And that takes courage and honesty. Being mad about something that you perceive as wrong, giving yourself righteous indignation, we get lost in that far too often, and we forget to cultivate these gifts. And the next thing you know, we got a wolf on our butt, chasing us out the door. We're having a hard time. People are hurling insults at us. Oh, I don't know what to do. I'm going to make an offering. Maybe we should just change our minds. Maybe we should just change our thought process. I heard today the most amazing thing, that some fMRI studies or iMRI studies most recently were studying the active regions of the brain as people perceived things around them. 50% of that activity came from memory. 50% of what we see is something we expect to see. So if you think about that and you begin to change your mind, you really are going to change your reality. You're going to start seeing things in a much different light. Who has the courage to do that? Because that's the biggest thing right there. First thing we've got to do is be honest with ourselves about 2019. Hey man, there's some things I could have done a hell of a lot better. I got to be honest about that. Then I got to change my thoughts. Then I got to change my minds. I know the gifts that I have. Am I using them to their ability? Or am I simply skipping around with them, or just kind of playing with them at this or at that, or just when I need them, or just kind of going through the motions, expecting all kinds of stuff, but never really taking the responsibility to develop myself as this is. Next thing you know, I'm facing hard times because I didn't bother to change my mind or cultivate my gifts. Now, it does also tell us in our lore what it looks like if we do that. I've said for a long time, and I'll probably say it until I die, you can't come up with a problem in life that I can't find an answer to in this Poetic and Prose Edda. You're not going to. It says right here in the Rig's Thula, these 3 generational visits of Rig. It says right there, Become the rung learned runes to use, runes everlasting, the runes of life. Soon could he well the warrior shield, dull the sword blade, still the seas. Bird chatter learned he, flames could he lessen, minds could quiet, and sorrows calm the might and strength of twice four men. So Cone, the son of, by noble birth, the son of Jarl, learned the use of the runes. Odin had to sacrifice part of who and what he is, come to the very edge of death to get rid of those things, because think about it. If you're a drunk or a junkie, you'll drink or drug yourself to the point of dying or almost to it before you stop. Hey, man, maybe I need to stop doing this. Some people don't make it. They go ahead and go on over the edge, and they end up OD'd or dead in a car crash or some nonsense like that, or in jail because they've been a fuck up all their life. They got to change something. Odin figured that out hanging on that tree. He did it voluntarily. We have that opportunity to do it too. To voluntarily take a hold of some of these things and change these ideas about who and what we are, and pick up the runes and hear the songs of our ancestors. See, that's like Otter. He made all these prayers to all these gods. He didn't know who he was. He didn't know where he come from. He didn't know what he was capable of. So after he made that connection with his spirituality and his faith, then he began to understand what his ancestors meant to you. All of these ancestors come together, survived, fought, lived, thrived, died. All of that is boiled down into each and every one of you. I saw the most amazing saying the other day, and I can't quote it, but it goes something like this. How dare you? You doubt yourself? After all of these people that went before you have done something to thrive, survive, and create a being that would bring you into this world, how dare you doubt yourself? See, we don't dare doubt ourselves, but in a crazy twist of our own thought process, one we very much learned, one that is based on memory, that we can change and stop seeing what we expect to see, we might begin to see some really neat stuff. We might learn what those runes really are. We might develop something. This is where it gets interesting. See, Rig Jarl, he soon the runes he shared. More crafty he was and greater his wisdom, the right he sought, and soon he wanted Rig to be called and runes to know. That's a pretty tall order, going from a king to a god. But he earned the right to be called Rig. Call him a boomer, if you will. Okay. Hate that stupid term. Young Cone rode forth through forest and grove. Shafts let loose and birds he lured. There spake a crow on a bow that sat. Why lurest thou, Cone, the birds to come? 'Twere better forth on thy steed to fare and the host to slay. So Cone's kind of like this millennial kid, just kind of wandering around through the forest and the grove, talking about this, talking about that, screwing with the birds, kicking rocks. The crow says, dude, you realize what you're capable of? Why don't you get out there and do it? What's the holdup? So he goes and does it. Greater than wealth and all this wonderful stuff, and founded this great kingdom. The kind of thing is this is the founder of Danemark, Dan and Damp, the halls that he founded. This is kind of a mythological telling of the kingdom of Denmark. And this is where it come from. So how can we relate to that? Can I see that? Because now all of a sudden I'm looking at this lore, and it's not all about trickery and nonsense and brute force and ridiculousness that I see so much of on so many of these message boards about people that will interpret it to the lowest common denominator so they don't have to change anything. That's typically what you come across. Well, I'm going to interpret it this way because, there's no asopope. Well, you go right ahead. You interpret that down to the most comfortable point for yourself so you don't have to change anything. But don't go expecting blessings or talk about being disappointed in life because you haven't achieved anything, because you didn't have the courage to be honest with yourself about what that really meant. Perhaps 2020, this new decade, might be the time you have the courage to do that. Because that's the real challenge for all of us. If our children never see what it looks like for us to do that, to grab the bull by the horns and become something better, Why would they want to follow this faith and spirituality that we all think is so important? Why? Because the real image of what it looks like finally shows up at the end of the Voluspa. When the warder of heaven, Heimdall, slays Loki. The warder of heaven, the high-minded Aesir, and everything they represent as they feast in the ocean like goose, everything's kind of connected together. When the warder of heaven, Heimdall, the whitest of the Aesir, slays Loki, that uninspired human intellect, the ego run amok, the standard condition of most people who are more interested in buying into whatever righteously indignant idea they can buy into so they can feel right about something, well, they're not really ever going to be able to cross the Bifrost and understand what some of these high-minded concepts mean, because that takes courage and honesty. Figure it out. Grab a hold of some of that for yourself. And that's a painful change. And it might really shake the very foundations of your world, might burn them to the ground. See, that Ragnarok works at a personal level every bit as much as it does on a cosmological level. You might have to get rid of some of the things that are causing you the pain, but you're familiar with them. It's interesting how much people will tolerate pain and misery if they're familiar with it instead of risking going on without it. What will I become if I let go of this thing that gives me my identity? You're going to burn it to the ground. It'd be an entirely different thing. You'd be a different person. Something new, something worthy of the gifts, or of cultivating the gifts that it says we all have. After it's all said and done, after it's all burnt down, and every man that's gone through a midlife crisis and lost everything and blah, 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 and every woman that's done the same thing, that's had some midlife crisis or menopause, or men to go through whatever they go through, that's what happens. We have millennials doing it now at 25. These kids are growing up watching the Kardashians, thinking they can get out and not really do anything and live this fantastic lifestyle. And then we say, hey, go get a job. And they get a job at Hot Topic or some nonsense like that in the mall, and they bring home a $189 paycheck for 2 weeks. Look, you're only working part-time for $9 an hour. I don't know what to tell you. It's crushing them. They don't know what to do with it. And we're kind of busy wondering about some political stuff or some nonsense somebody told us we need to be worried about so we can be important in their eyes, and we're playing a walk-on role in some other person's life. It's time to burn all that down. Now is the time. Tonight is the time to let go of a bunch of that nonsense. Now do I see the earth anew? If we change our thoughts and change our thinking, we change that pattern of memory that provides 50% of the input for the world that we see, what we expect to see. We see what we think we're going to see. Change your thoughts, change your mind, change your reality, change how you look at the world. Now do I see the earth anew? Rise all green from the waves again. The cataracts fall and the eagles fly. The fish he catches beneath the cliffs. Walk out into the morning any night after a big storm's gone through the night before, and the world looks different. We expect to see something different because the storm's gone through. Same thing, same principle works in your life. The gods in Ithaval meet together. Of the terrible girdler of earth they talk. They don't forget what brought them to this crossroads. They don't rename it. They don't minimize it. They don't change it. They don't give it a new coat of paint. They don't recreate it. They talk of it. And they talk of the mighty past they call to mind, and the ancient runes of the ruler of gods. They remember their ancestors. In wondrous beauty once again shall the golden table stand amid the grass, which the gods had owned in the days of old. So now we're reclaiming some of the beauty of that heritage, and this is what our children are going to do. It may not be us. We're the sacrificial lamb in all this, whether we like it or not. We have to get it right, so our kids have something to talk about when they're gone, of the change that Daddy did, the changes that Mama did to become something better. Then fields unsowed bear ripened fruit. All ills grow better, and Balder comes back. Something very special there about forgiveness. We don't talk about it very much, and we don't ask for it very often. Balder and Hoth dwell in Hrolf's battle hall. Hoth is the one that killed Balder by accident, and they dwell together in Valhalla. And the mighty gods, would you yet know more? Then Honir wins the prophetic wand, and the sons of the brother of Tvigi abide in Vindheim now. Would you yet know more? Now in the Hauksbach version, the first two lines said, the gods shall find their wondrous fair, the golden tables amid the grass. If we change our thoughts and we change our mind about all this stuff we expect to see and start looking for what's really there, who knows what beauty we might see. Anytime you walk in a forest and you don't know what to expect, everybody talks about how wonderful it is. It was so grand, I could feel it. It's because you were paying attention, because you didn't know what you were going to see, and there was something special that showed up. More fair than the sun, a hall I see, roofed with gold, on Gimli it stands. There shall the righteous rulers dwell, and happiness ever shall they have. And that's a heck of a big promise. But if we get it right, is that not the potential for our children? If we don't condition their thought process in the same manner we've been conditioned, if we teach them to keep looking, to have that opened mind, to have that kind of thought process where they expect success, where they cultivate the gifts that they have, work hard, and understand that those two things go hand in hand to enjoy the success they expect to have. And once they can figure that out, they got it made. See, that's an image of what we could become. That's an image of the lives our children could have. That's an image of the future we could build. And it is not reliant on anything other than each one of us taking the bull by the horns, being honest with ourselves, and being courageous enough to say, I need to let that go because that's hurting me. These things, these ideas of the past, are not what make you who you are. They might help others identify you, but it's just a small fraction of the greatness of what you really are, what you can create, what you can believe, what you can love, what you can feel. If we can share that with our children, now we've got something truly wonderful to work with. You can find all of this in my new book, Truerbach, and it's all fantastic because I heard a guy say one time, if you can't, he said, people tell him you can't do math, well, do it for a year, then come back and tell me how good you can do it. Same thing with my writing. Well, I've done it for a little bit longer than a year because I'm a slow learner, but it's getting where it needs to be. These are the kind of things we need to be looking at and expecting from our faith and spirituality. Not some conditional set of standards about whatever kind of system of government some retard thinks we ought to have. Get out of here. The only thing I want to be is left alone from my government. Leave me alone. I don't want nothing to do with you. You stay over there. I'll stay over here. I'll pay my taxes. We're good to go. That's it. See, I got wrapped up in that quick. That's how easy it happens. That's how conditioned our thought process is. Am I teach my kid that? Is that going to help her be happy? Is that going to help my sons be happy? That's because at this point, I have grandchildren now. I don't want my children to teach my grandchildren some of the nonsense they watched me do. And it requires dramatic, radical self-sacrifice like Odin went through to become that new person that all of this lore is telling me I have the potential to become. What's your lore telling you? Maybe we can take a look at it and figure out there really is something fantastic going on here we can all enjoy. Thanks for joining me, guys, and I hope you have a wonderful, happy, merry, just awesome new year, because I'm going to.